Republicans control the White House, the Senate, and the House. They own the state of our country right now. The cost of living is skyrocketing, and many Americans feel stuck, unable to buy new homes, find new jobs, or move to new cities. On top of that, health insurance companies are jacking up premiums at the highest rate in 15 years. And costs for 22 million Americans will go up by an average of over 75% if Republicans don't act to extend ACA tax credits. As Trump and Republicans push these policies, it's clear they're rigging the system to make life better for them. From Trump accepting a luxury jet from Qatar to Trump and his family taking advantage of his office to make $5 billion in cryptocurrency ventures, Trump and his administration have taken government corruption to a new level. And as voters begin to channel their frustration at the ballot box, while Democrats gain momentum to the tune of 45 out of 47 key election wins or over performances, Trump has ordered Republicans to move the goalposts, rigging congressional maps in his favor as the American people attempt to hold him and his dangerous agenda accountable. So today on the Daily Blueprint, we're joined by Congressman Joe Morelle, a top Democrat on the Committee on House Administration, who has been spearheading efforts in Congress to get rid of corruption in our government at all levels, hold the Trump administration accountable, and protect your right to do the same at the ballot box. I'm Hannibal David, Deputy Communications Director for the Democrats, and your host for today. This is the Democrats' Daily Blueprint. Congressman Joe Morelle, welcome to the Daily Blueprint.
It's nice to be with you, Hannah. Thanks for having me.
Now, I want to note that we're recording this before the government shutdown deadline. And, time and time again, Trump and Republicans have refused to negotiate with Democrats to keep the government open. And this is all as millions of Americans wonder if they'll still be able to afford health care. So, my question for you, what is the feeling among you and your Democratic colleagues? And have you heard anything from constituents as Republicans are bringing us to the brink of a shutdown?
Yeah, it's a great series of questions. I think from my colleagues and we believe this is critically important to really draw the line in the sand. The big, what we call big ugly bill, the reconciliation bill, will have the net effect of removing 15 million Americans from health insurance. It's almost hard to even get your head wrapped around why a major political party, why the president of the United States would work so hard to deny health insurance to Americans who need it. Now, what they want to do in this short-term CR, we call it, continuing resolution, is to further erode by not extending the subsidies or the tax credits for the Affordable Care Act, further erode the health insurance of millions of Americans who are going to be affected and in short order. So we think this is an essential battle. We think it's an indication of the things we value. And we also think we have the support of the American people. And the more that they learn about this, Hannah, the more I think people will recognize that we're standing out for average people and the Republicans are not. And honestly, I would say this. It is really hard to appreciate fully. Democrats, you go back far enough, Democrats are the party of Medicare, Medicaid in the 1960s, the Affordable Care Act under Barack Obama. And the Republican response for years now has been, first of all, they have no health care plan whatsoever. I mean, Donald Trump has been interested in the presidency for nearly a decade. He's never come up with a health care plan. There's none in the Senate or the House. But they seem to take this extraordinary interest in denying health insurance to people, the American people. I really can't begin to understand why that is, but they seem hell-bent on trying to have people be essentially self-insured or take care of themselves, or they have to pay extraordinary premiums. And I just don't understand where they're going with this.
No, I agree with you. It's, we remember the very famous John McCain thumbs down, and that was basically stopping Republicans' effort to repeal the Affordable Care Act. We're still today talking about making sure the Affordable Care Act not only gets people health care, but that it can be affordable. I think the number that I read was if Republicans refuse to act, that if you're on the Affordable Care Act, your premiums will go up 118%. I cannot afford that. I don't know what person across America can afford that right now.
Well, and really you would think since we're so worried, we say we're worried about the affordability of the cost of living in America. Inflation is on the rise, despite what the president, he likes to make up his own economic facts, but that's the truth. And I want to make health insurance so much more expensive for millions of Americans or deny it outright. And the interesting thing about this, which and I'm sure most of your viewers know, is whether you have health insurance coverage or not is completely independent on whether you get sick or not. So when you get sick, or worse, your child gets sick, you're going to see a doctor. Now, probably the likelihood is you end up in an emergency room in a hospital where they're going to take care of you without regard to whether you're going to pay, whether you'll pay them in the future. They just take care of sick people. That's their oath. And so this is not only going to affect people who've lost their health insurance. When you're in an emergency room, and more people are coming in with probably very acute illnesses because they couldn't go see a primary care provider, they don't have one. So they just got sicker and sicker until they can't take it anymore and they end up in an emergency room. That impacts everyone. And so whether you still have commercial insurance or Medicare or Medicaid, or you're not insured at all, you're all going to be impacted by it. And the thing that's really even more kind of astonishing about this is the health facilities that are going to be impacted first. They won't be the last, but they'll be first. Will be rural communities where they have federally qualified health clinics and they have small hospitals who are really going to struggle. And many of those people probably helped propel Donald Trump to the White House. So he's actually going after a lot of the people who are his supporters and doesn't seem to have any, reluctance in doing it. Seems perfectly happy to do it.
No, it doesn't make any sense. I do want to turn to what you do when you're in Congress. You're the top Democrat, the ranking member on the Committee on House Administration. Now, tell me, what does this committee do? What are some of your priorities? What have you been proud to accomplish? Give us some insight, Congressman.
So, as I was telling you before we went on the air, Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader in the House and someone I served with in the New York State Legislature before coming to Congress, asked me to take the role here. And I admitted to him that I really wasn't sure what the jurisdiction of the committee was. It is, as it sounds like, it is responsible for the day-to-day operations of the House of Representatives. So I spent a lot of time with people on things that just help them run their office, employment issues, how to deal with staff, et cetera. And then it has responsibility for federal election law. So all the debate that has gone on over the last few years about mail-in balloting and American citizens and voter ID and all the things that the Republicans have really tried to do to make it harder for people to register and to vote, that comes under our committee's jurisdiction. Member security, we have oversight over the United States Capitol Police. So all the security measures, sergeant at arms, all fall under that committee. And then we have oversight over a lot of cultural institutions, the Library of Congress, the Government Printing Office, the Government Copyright Office, as well as the Smithsonian Institution. So it's a pretty varied portfolio. It's fascinating. I get to do a lot of member engagement, which I love dealing with my members. And in a prior life, I was the majority leader of the New York State Assembly, which is smaller, seemed awfully big at the time, but there's 435 members of the House, only 150 in the State Assembly. So, and many of my responsibilities as majority leader are similar to sort of the administrative responsibilities here in Congress. So it's been a lot of fun. It's very, very rewarding to be able to help members navigate through their day and work with their staff. So I really do enjoy it. And honestly, right now, you asked about my priorities. A couple things that I would touch on. First and foremost, try to ensure that every single American has access to a ballot and that their voice is heard. We truly don't have the full promise of American democracy if people are excluded from being able to vote. And more the Republican Party is wedded to the idea of putting more barriers in the way of people registering to vote, voting. And I frankly, the cynic in me thinks that they're doing it just because all they care about is political gain, that they don't really care about the promise of democracy or the importance of participation in the democracy. The second thing that I do, which is relatively new, that the leader Jeffries has tasked me with helping to organize a broadly speaking, sort of a series of measures to combat corruption in government. I mean, one of the things that I think we all talk about, I'm sure you're thinking about, many Democrats around the country, is how to regain trust in the American people. How will they come to trust institutions again? And so we're looking at the manner in which we really try to let people know that we're on their side. We want them to succeed, and we want to do everything we can to allow every single American the opportunity to fulfill their dreams and hopes and aspirations.
Yeah, you mentioned this corruption work. I have some stats here. So, two-thirds of Americans think the government is corrupt, which is a very high number. But when you look at who is in the Oval Office, so Donald Trump accepting luxury jets from foreign countries, profiting off of crypto schemes, you see this corruption happening at the very top, and you have to think, yeah, that might make sense that two-thirds of Americans feel this way. But that's obviously not what Democrats believe or are fighting for. So how do you even begin to battle this when this culture of corruption is clearly hitting us from the top?
Yeah, I think the frustration for a lot of people in the Democrat world is how did we get to a place where we're not trusted by average Americans, and yet Donald Trump is, or he seems to be able to avoid scrutiny for a $400 million jet being delivered to the United States as a gift, which he gets to use personally after he leaves the Oval Office. I mean, there's no precedent in American history. I love that sometimes Republicans will say, well, this is like when the United States received the Statue of Liberty. Uh,
I'm sorry. They don't really say that, do they?
they do say it, absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
Check out Mark Wayne Mullen, who's I think represents Oklahoma in the United States Senate. I saw it on TV talking about, well, this is like the Statue of Liberty. Okay, well, first of all, Statue of Liberty was a gift from France. And by the way, Congress, in accord with the United States Constitution, actually both houses accepted the gift by resolution, something we didn't do.
Interesting. Okay.
And Grover Cleveland, who was the president at the time, didn't take it home with him. It's in the harbor. So there's hardly an analogy here, but even when they analogize it, they're wrong. I mean, so that is all. And look, your point about cryptocurrencies is really, really important. I mean, the Trump family has benefited to the tune, depending on who you listen to, but at least $5 billion since January. It is breathtaking. And what's really so, I don't even, I sometimes lose the words. I mean, what is so really corrupt about it is that a lot of people buying these meme coins and these other things that the Trump folks are selling are completely worthless. They're being paid by, folks who, don't have a lot, but they think this is some kind of investment or they want to honor the president. I mean, this is the greatest grift by any president in American history. So those are the kind of things that I think we want to deal with, not to mention, certainly, some of the abuses by Clarence Thomas and the Supreme Court. So I think this has to extend to the judiciary, to the executive branch. I think we have to get dark money out of our politics. I believe in public financing of campaigns. So there's an element there. But I also don't think Congress is above it. I think we need a stock trading ban so that members are not trading stock as day traders. They do have access to information at times. And so I think if we're going to be able to persuade the American public that we're serious about it, we have to look at our own dealings as well. So I think each of those elements will go in an overall package. But things like eliminating the Citizens United decision by the Supreme Court, which treats corporations as though they're individuals in some crazy, illogical decision reached by the Supreme Court, or immunity for the president for certain acts that he should not hold immunity for. So I think you're going to see it's a pretty broad package. I'm working with my colleagues to help organize that on behalf of the Democratic caucus. I think you'll hear more about it in the next several months.
Well, we thank you and we'll be supportive of your Democratic efforts to fight corruption. And one last thing I wanted to mention, you mentioned that you've been working hard against Republican efforts to suppress voters. On National Voter Registration Day, I think that was last week or a couple of weeks ago, you introduced the Climate Resilient Elections Act to help fortify elections against the serious threat of climate change. So talk to us a little bit about why it's important to acknowledge climate change's role in voting access. I found this interesting.
Well, it is interesting, I know the President of the United States thinks that climate change is the greatest con job in the history of the world, which is sort of interesting because I think if you looked in the mirror, you really see the greatest con job in the history of the world, and that's Donald Trump as president. But, there is consensus around the world by scientists that climate change and the climate crisis is here. And if you look at the impact that natural disasters have on voting and boards of elections, I think we have an obligation to start thinking about resiliency. How do we make sure that a community that is hit by a tornado or a hurricane just days before an election or a flood, how do we ensure that those people continue to be in a position to be able to vote? How do we help local boards of elections, state boards of elections? How do we ensure the integrity of the vote? So the bill seeks to address all that and recognizes that the number of large storms has gone up in terms of frequency and severity, and we have to make this a priority. If you believe that participation by citizens is critical to a democracy, you have to have both greater attention paid to making sure that you live up to that promise. You also have to invest resources to make it happen. So things that you value, and I think American democracy, you could not overvalue it. I think we should be putting more and more resources to make sure that states and local boards of elections have the resources they need, and don't just wait, put your head in the sand and ignore what is, plain is the, hand in front of my face. I mean, climate change is here, it's destructive, it's growing in its destructive nature, we need to be prepared for it.
Congressman Morelle, thank you so much for your leadership. Thank you so much for joining us today on our episode of the Daily Blueprint. And we appreciate you, and we'll support you with all of these endeavors to fight for our democracy, to fight for healthcare, and to make sure we keep saying that climate change is real, because Donald Trump and his administration are trying to even scrub that language from what we're seeing over there. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
We'd like to thank Congressman Joe Morelle for joining us. And here at the Daily Blueprint, we're highlighting candidates who are also fighting for working families and who need your support to win. Today, we want to spotlight Tina Orwall, a dedicated Washingtonian running to retain her seat in Washington's 33rd State Senate District. In her role as a legislator, Tina has focused on advocating for the most vulnerable, with special focus on veterans, women, youth, and survivors of sexual assault. She has fought to improve the justice system for victims of sexual violence, worked on suicide prevention programs, and led efforts to combat sex trafficking. If you want to get involved and support Tina Orwall's campaign, go to electtinaorwall.com/volunteer. You can find the link in our video description below. Thanks for joining us today for this episode of the Daily Blueprint. We'll be right here with you every weekday at 10 a.m. Eastern on the DNC's YouTube page. Until then.